Hello everyone, Xanaro Gaming coming at y'all with another video, and we are talking Digimon today. Now, a lot of you know that pretty soon we are supposed to be getting a ban list announcement from the Digimon trading card game company, and with that being said, I know I've seen a lot of people doing their ban list prediction videos, and I try to wait a little bit closer to it, but I am ready to talk about it. I have a lot of different things I want to say. We're going to be talking over what all the hot cards are that most people are predicting are an issue in the game. I want to break those down, go over them so you all know kind of like what the community is saying overall about what we want hit and the cards up for discussion. I'll be doing that. Cards I think will be coming off the ban list. Cards that are, why are they on the ban list and probably not coming off? The cards I actually think will get hit, and a couple other topics to ensue, right? So I'll try to timestamp all of these, so whichever topic you're most interested in. But the first thing I want to go into is what are most of the cards that people think are a problem in the game. Now, I know this is a very extensive list I have here. I did some polling on different Discord servers and in my local game shop's Discord server as well, Omni Cards Collectibles and Gaming in Moultrie, Georgia. And these are essentially the cards that kept coming up over and over again in every discussion. And if not these cards, different decks that run these cards. So these are a lot of the cards I think are up for discussion if they should or should not be hit on any type of list, whether it be restricted or banned outright. And I kind of just want to talk to everyone about what each of these cards are, why people think that they are an issue in the game. And the first one being, I want to be able to zoom in on these cards. There we go. I guess I can do that with the full screen. There we go. Royal Knights of the Purge, right? Royal Knights is tuned out the wazoo. If there's one deck that I do not like the most in the Digimon trading card game, it's any deck that abuses stuff in the breeding area to get value, because I do believe that that has gone against what, you know, Digimon has always instilled in place, which is the breeding area is a separate thing. Now, you guys have heard me complain about that enough. I won't go too far into detail why I dislike that, but I do think that Royal Knights does not have a lot of ways to outplay it, and the value that the deck gets is inherently just, you know, busted and outpaces what a lot of decks can do. I do think that Royal Knights of the Purge is one of the big consistency cards in the deck, and it does let them be able to do a lot of different shenanigans that they wouldn't be able to do in the first place. But this card gives them so much value, it's never costing them 6. You get to cycle through your deck, you get to place cards underneath your King Drasil to get value, and then later be able to get a Royal Knight out. Now, you don't get their on-play effects, but they do gain rush. You get to swing and do all kinds of crazy shenanigans if they have effects that say when attacking. So I do think that Royal Knights of the Purge is one of the biggest issues in the, you know, King Drasil Royal Knight deck. Another one of the cards that is an issue, I think that is up for a topic of debate, is the Last Guardian. I know that this one came out BT20, but it being paired with the Omekamon is just incredibly crazy. It hits in security. You get to play an Omekamon or Cool Boy from your hand or trash. Then you get this card in the battle area. I don't think it should have had that second part of this effect saying place it in the battle area. But just being able to play the Omekamon, the Cool Boy, is insane. And spoilers, Omekamon is on here for us to talk about as well. Just being able to search your deck for any of these cards that you need. It's just another consistency piece in the deck. Now, I do think that if this card got hit, it wouldn't really hurt the power level of the deck too much. It may be a little harder to see some of your cards, but this one is on the bottom end of what I think probably should be hit. I'd rather honestly talk about the Omekamon, and this card is a problem. There's not a lot of ways to play around this Omekamon if you don't know what it does. On play, if you have one for your security, this Digimon may Digivolve into an Omnimon. X anybody in the hand, ignoring Digivolution requirements. To kind of state this, if you check the Last Guardian, it's their last security. They play out the Omekamon. Now the Omekamon can then on play let it Digivolve into the Omnimon X anybody without paying the cost. That has happened to me before in games, and I've seen it happen often enough where it does come up. And just him being able to on deletion, place it in there, and then be able to get this, you know, breeding effect. I do think the Omekamon is a big problem. And if I had to pick one card that I would prefer to see from the Royal Knight deck get hit, it would be Royal Knights of the Purge, but I feel like a lot of people will cry about that killing the deck. I don't think that it would kill the deck. It would slow it down a little bit and take away some of its consistency. But the one that I would probably say at the end, I'll have a list edited for you guys all of what I think will get hit, and I think that I would have to pick the Omegamon from this spool of cards. Now, Omnimon X Antibody from BT20 is just a really, really strong card, and I want to talk in tandem about Omnimon X Antibody with Medieval Gallantmon, right? These are just two very generic level 6 and 7 cards in the game that really can just blow your opponent out. Medieval Gallantmon being a very generic card that you can throw in absolutely any deck makes him such a really, really powerful card. But talking on the Medieval Gallantmon, I don't think this gets hit, right? Death Xmon was this card back in the day, right? If you didn't play the game, but when Death Xmon first came out, a lot of people were talking about Death Xmon in the same vein that people talk about Medieval Gallantmon. But the issue with Medieval Gallantmon is that it is, generic, and it also has multiple decks that it just plays into well, that you can just digivolve on top of this guy and not have any kind of backfall, where Death Xmon was just kind of a generic card that kind of made most of your plays clunky, and Medieval Gallantmon is even better than Death Xmon, with it being able to be digivolved in all these decks it gets played in, still be able to get max value for its effects. And I do not think Medieval Gallantmon will get touched. I know it is a card I had to bring up on here for us to talk about, and a lot of people do think that he should be hit, but I don't think that that's going to happen based off of history of Death Xmon. And with that being said, I think the same thing with Omnimon X Anybody. I do not think that they will hit Omnimon X Anybody. There are a couple other cards that have to do with the Omnimon deck that we'll touch up on here. Omnimon is very strong. If your opponent gives you 6 memory, they have no life, and you have an Omnimon in your hand, you can just win the game, right? Because you can play it down for 16, swing in, blow up their stuff, whatever, everything you need to do to win the game, and it is just a really strong card. And I think that obviously Omnimon decks use him to very strong extents, like with the Royal Knights, the actual different versions of the DNA Omnimon decks. But I don't think outside of that, like, you can just run Omnimon in any generic, blue, white, and red, white, blue kind of colors, but it's just a good card. I don't think that he'll get hit. But one other card, now that we're touched on the Royal Knights in kind of a Sue, let's touch on something that is also Royal Knight, but, is not a Royal Knight, it's a Holy Warrior, but is going to be the Omnimon Alter S. I know a lot of people have a problem with this card, right? Being able to get this card in, your opponent can't affect it. It is really, really strong. And then at the end of the turn, being able to play out any Greymon or Garurumon in their name or version traits. But I don't think that this card will get hit, because this guy is really, really important for that entire deck and archetype, because it is the key bad guy, big monster for DM trait cards, right? And they did just release that. I think if they hit this Omnimon, it'll really stifle those decks, and those decks aren't like high crazy tier. If you want to play with any of those version 1 or 2 trait DM decks, and you kind of relying on Omnimon to be your boss monster outside of being able to do the crazy shenanigans in the Omnimon deck, though. So instead of hitting this guy, I do think that, another card to come up with, which you do see this card getting abused, is Miraculous Mega Knight, because this says, it keeps your plays safe, and then it lets you be able to DNA Digivolve into the Omnimon when they do try to get rid of something. And I do think that this card is the problem card, and this is going to lead me into talking about some of the other cards people do not like, which is Return of the Primogenitor. This is the same kind of thing that you get, but in the free DNA decks, right? These protection cards make these aggro decks not have a lot of downfall in what they want to do, and I do think that these cards are inherently the main issues with these archetypes that DNA Digivolve. Being able to get these free cards on the board is just absolutely the cards that make them so strong. I think they hit these to 1, then you have to see them. If they see it once for the protection, maybe you could play through that, but playing through more than one of these cards, you don't do it, right? If they get this set up, the Miraculous Mega Knight for the DNA Omni deck, or the Return of the this card is always so hard to say, Primogenitor, then you can't outvalue that, right? And I do think that these two cards are big problems, and a lot of people have brought these up. I think from those two decks, those would be the hits that I would try and take going forward, and hopefully that is what they do. I've been calling for the Primogenitor for a while. I know they hit the Stingmon, but the deck is still topping like crazy. It's still a really strong deck. the Stingmon didn't do anything, and I think a lot of people laughed at them putting that on the list because it was clearly not an issue in the deck when we saw multiple topping decks before that and afterwards, like topping without that card, barely won in the list in the first place, and it didn't do anything to really harm the deck. And I'm trying to stay on theme, and I have a great way to organize these. We touched on the Omnimon. We touched on the two cards that kind of are similar in those archetypes. So I do want to touch on the Davis Motamiya and Ken Ichijoji for the free trait. I do think that Blue-Green Imperial is still a crazy, insanely strong deck. And so is going to be like the purple-red one also, right? But I do think that if they hit all kinds of the cards that are doing really good right now, that being the topping decks like Sakuyamon, Gallantmon, and, just the Growl X stuff for, I'm blanking on his name. Y'all know what I'm talking about. But then also Royal Knights, all these decks that people were talking about being the top decks, if they all get hit and they also don't touch the Imperial Dramon decks, we will just go back to a world where Davis and Ken are getting so much value playing out a free Digimon that lets them DNA Digivolve that you won't be able to keep up with them again, and we'll be back to that story. So touching up on free traits, these are two of the cards that I think a lot of people are talking about that are issues with probably making that deck a little too strong, but we will see, right? But speaking on the Growl X and the Gyuumon kind of package with those two decks, I think that Gallantmon and Magidramon both will suffer if Growlmon X anybody gets hit. We will talk up on Gyuumon and Gravity Crush. I do think that Growlmon is the most powerful hit that you could do to both the decks to push the power level and what they can both do down enough to where they're both not crazy and consistent. The on deletion, being able to play the Rush Gyuumon out, is insanely strong in both versions of the deck, right? The Gallantmon X uses it as a backup to build into another big full body stack, whereas the Magidramon builds it up to be able to go into another Magidramon and swing of that turn. Both abuse the cards in different ways, but it is obviously, I think, the most powerful card that both of these decks got and both abuse out of 4 of, so I do want to see this one getting hit to 1, and the reason that we can see this card is probably going to get hit to 1 is that we've seen all the other good level 4 X Anybody cards all get hit to 1. The Greymon X Anybody, the Garurumon, the Numemon, all the good level 4 X Anybodies that are overtuned end up getting hit to 1. So if there's one card I think I'd have to pick from all this discussion, is that I do full-heartedly believe that Growlmon X Anybody should and will be hit to 1. It's probably the card I have the strongest feelings on this list. I think it's too good. It gives you too much value. It gains you memory. It lets you fix your hand, and it lets you get your board state back. The card is absolutely cracked, and it is so strong. It's more powerful than those other X Anybody cards that are currently hit to 1. So he definitely has to get hit to 1. And that's one of the hot takes I'll take, is that Growlmon X Anybody definitely, absolutely needs to get hit to 1. With that being said, I do think that if they hit Growlmon X Anybody to 1, then the Gyuumon can still survive. The Rush Gyuumon for EX4 is mainly a problem because of the Growlmon X Anybody being able to let you get him back and then him be able to rush. But I do like that other purple decks have a rush target in those decks, right? He doesn't have an inheritable, which doesn't make the Gyuumon crazy important in terms of being able to, abuse him that way. He only can Digivolve for 0 on top of the Gigimon, so if you're running him outside of that in the purple decks, then he is going to cost you 1 to Digivolve, so this card is really, I think, balanced in what they did. It's just other cards that have abused him. I do think that as long as they hit the Growlmon, then Gyuumon can live through it, and I think that they'll do the right thing, hit the Growlmon, keep the Gyuumon out of 4 of, and to be honest, a lot of the Gallantmon decks probably won't run the Gyuumon anymore, and maybe as a 1-of tech, right? We used to see it as a 1-of tech in these decks. I think that if they hit the Growlmon, the Gyuumon will probably just randomly be a hit to, just randomly 1 in any decks, because now you can't abuse it as much. But now the purple decks that need this card to get value later in the game, but how they fill up their graveyards, can still use this card, and it probably could end up being an issue, but the card is, I think, balanced. Now, Gravity Crush is going away. We've seen all these free memory gaining shenanigan cards all get hit to 1, and I've been calling for these cards forever. Since, BT6 or something I've been calling for all these cards to get hit, and I'm glad that they finally over the last year been slowly hitting all these cards, because the consistency and just the value you get on all of these cards is absolutely crazy. Even if Gravity Crush got eroded, right? We don't see Digimon really ever do that, but even if it said at the start of your opponent's turn, they gain that 2 memory, so that way they could stack it up with the tamers. I still think the card would get hit, but I think that could be a way they could maybe try to balance it. But the reason this card is busted, right, is because your opponent's using this card to win the game, and there's no playing around it too much outside of random floodgates that they can pop with the deck anyways, right? Like, you got to have at least 2 or 3 of those floodgates on the board to keep them from popping off. And I do think that this card will get hit to 1. It is very abusable, and we've seen all these cards. I don't have too much more to say about that one going to 1. Now, I know it's kind of split up here. I do want to touch on the purple hybrid and other purple stuff in a second, but I have Digivolution Plugin S as a card I've seen a lot of people bring up, and the Rika No Naka from BT 19 coming up as well as cards in Sakuyamon to get hit, right? Because Sakuyamon is still topping like crazy, even with the previous hit that it got. So if we hit all these other decks and all these other decks get hit, Sakuyamon also has to get touched too to keep it in check. And out of these 2 cards, I am a big proponent of thinking that the value you get from this Digivolution plugin is insane in the deck, because you get to play it for free, you get to Digivolve for free, and you get to draw a card for free. That is too much value to let you get in the deck. If you add all that up together, that's a... You're going to play it from the Tamer, which gains you 1, right? You're playing it for free, which is 2 memory there, and then it lets you Digivolution cost of 3 or less for free. That's 5 memories worth of value play in that play that you get to do countless times in the deck. I think they need to hit this to 1 or ban it. I don't think they'll ban it. Maybe get it hit to 1, because I think a lot of people look at this card and don't think it's that much of an issue. But if maybe me explaining it that way to you, that this card is technically 5 memories worth of free play in the deck, that makes it sound way more powerful, right? Because you're getting to Digivolve, you play this for free, which should cost 2, and then you get to Digivolve for 3, which should cost you 3, and then your Tamer's going to gain you 1, right? So that's 5 memories worth just for Digivolving on your Tamer. The value or on your Digimon, the value you get from this card is insane. And I think if more people thought about it the way I just explained it like that, if any other card gains you that much value in the game, you would be thinking that it was busted. I do think that this card needs to get hit to 1, because the further we get in the game of cards maybe being able to use this, I used to use this all the time back in the day because it was just such a generic card. I use it in almost all of my green decks to be able to get those free Digivolutions, and it's just a really good card. I am glad that it's finally found a deck that has been abusing it so people can see how powerful the card is, but it does need to get hit to 1, because if we keep seeing these shenanigans of playing these option cards for free, it is really, really powerful. With that being said, I think if they hit the plug-in, the Rika doesn't need to get hit, but if they don't hit the plug-in, the Rika has to come down. It's your searcher, and it gains you memory. The reason I can see the Rika not getting hit is because in the next EX10 set that we are getting a lot of Tamer hate, and a lot more control is going to be coming back into the meta. And with that being said, I think a lot of those decks coming in will have an easy time getting, over the Rina, because she does have to suspend to gain that memory, and you're going to see a lot more Tamer hate coming out with this new set coming into the meta, where some of these control decks can start competing. So I don't think they hit the Rina, even though I think that that's the easier call to make, like, oh, just hit the Rina Tamer. I do think that hurts the deck a lot more, not being able to search and get all this in, but they do have, other ways to search, but at least they don't get to gain the memory. They can run all the plugins, all the trainings, all the mem boosts, all that stuff, and still be doing pretty well. And even if they really hit both of these, I would not be surprised. But, it is what it is for that one. I know a lot of people have strong feelings about Sakuyamon. I personally don't too much, because I play control already. If you play a control deck, it's kind of easy to control the deck when you're playing one of these aggro decks. If that deck pops off, it controls you too hard, so I get what the matchup is doing. But both of those cards are cards to talk about, right? All cards that we need to be on alert about. These are very relevant in this one. Now, going on to purple, I do think that 7 Great Demon Lords is not getting talked about enough. It keeps topping way more in Japan than it does here, and I don't think that they are going to touch this deck. I do think they need to be talked about. I know a lot of people brought up 7 Great Demon Lords. There's very strong opinions probably about how often at your locals someone is playing this deck, and it is just a really, really strong overtuned deck. Not overtuned as Royal Knights, but it is a strong deck. And the only thing I could come up with, they can't hit Gate of the Deadly Sins, right? Because that just absolutely murders the deck. With that being said, it could be any whichever Demon Lord that you want to bring up. But in my picking of this deck, I do think that Lucamon Chaos Mode is kind of a problem in all of the decks, right? This helps you touch Lucamon decks so they don't get too crazy. If this touch comes in, it helps keep the 7 Great Demon Dwarves down a little bit. This card is really, really powerful, and I don't want to touch on these too much because I don't think that they'll get hit, but I did want to bring them up. One of these cards is an issue, but there's so many 7 Great Demon Lords. Picking which one is the hugest problem is kind of a hard thing to do, right? But I would have to go on Lucamon Chaos Mode for Chaos Mode from EX6 as the card I would probably touch in 7 Great Demon Lords. And the last cards to talk about that are on alert that people want me to talk about and what they think should be hit is purple hybrid stuff. Because even with the hit purple hybrid already got, with the mat going down to banned, the deck is still popping off like crazy because you can still do your shenanigans, you can still mill your opponent out and do all kinds of crazy things. Now, what is the 3 most important cards in the deck, right? Dustmon, Velgramon, and Koichi are definitely all 3 up there. Now, go ahead and say I don't think that Koichi gets touched because we only have a couple Koichis in the game, and then you still want to be able to Digivolve on top of your Koichi. But the Koichi is really good because you get to abuse the Koichi. You don't care that you're getting on deletion. You love that you got the deletion effect to gain a memory. He lets you cycle cards from your hand into your trash, so it is a really big consistency piece in the deck. And I do think that Dustmon is the main key part of the deck too, but if you hit Dustmon, it doesn't allow you to do a lot else in the deck with all the other purple hybrid things. So I think the easiest card to bring up that probably should get hit to 1 is going to be the Velgramon, so that way you have to find it. Now, you can still loop it and do all these shenanigans to try to get it back to your hand in different ways, but at least only 1 Velgramon. You can't mill your opponent out, and we've seen how harsh they've been on mill cards, right? Like, we're not getting back my big boy, Armageddonmon, or not Armageddonmon, oh my god, Apocalypse in the game. Even I got to play with him for 1 weekend, and I didn't care that it was a mill deck. I just love Apocalypse. Now, luckily enough, I am probably getting a new Apocalypse in this new set, so it's going to be really cool. But they don't like people getting milled because it's not as interactive. And in Digimon, there's no ways to really counter milling in it at the moment. They would have to make more cards that help stop your opponent from milling you to be able to have some good matches. But I do think that Velgramon will get hit to 1. You can tech it in all your purple hybrid decks. You see it. But at the end of the day, they'll only have 1. They got to see it. And then purple hybrid can still do everything it wants and needs to do. It just can't mill your opponent out anymore, right? Which is not the way that you should be trying to win the game in most cases. At least what Bandai has told us that they don't like us being able to do. So those are all the cards that I think are on the alert, right? Cards that are on the alert that we need to talk about. I know this video is getting long. I'll probably break it up into different parts. Get ready to have a long video, probably 40-something minutes, right? Because I will try to break it down into different segments. This will summarize the cards that I think are all on alert. Now, I do have different categories that I want to go over, right? Cards that are not coming off the list. As much as I hope and dream and wish that would happen, Greymon X Anybody is not coming off the list. We know that we're getting new Black World Greymon support. There is just generic multiple layers of different Greymons that are now red and black. They are scared to bring this off the list because they don't want Black World Greymon popping off and just destroying everyone, even though I do think that it could come off the list, because if you look at his effect here, he only gets protection by having the X Anybody in the sources. And I know that doesn't come up as much as people think. They just always assume you have X Anybody to put in his sources, but this is not a generic protection. And his effect to just reduce the Digivolution, it's going to be by 2, because you're going to have 2 colors, right? So so you're just digivolving for either 1 or 2 anyways, and we've seen so many of these other cards cheat out memory on another level that we've talked about. Royal Knights of the Purge, The Last Guardian, Omekamon, Miraculous Mega Knights, Digivolution Plugin S, the Purple Hybrid stuff, all this Davis stuff right here. That's 3 memory each Digimon you bring out. Rika lets you gain a memory. All this stuff. There's so many other decks that abuse reducing and gaining memory that I do think that the Greymon X Anybody is outdated for how much memory it lets you cheat. But people don't care about that. People don't like when control decks are too strong or relevant in the game because people want to be able to play the game. So I understand where they're coming from. I don't think that Greymon will come off the list, but if Bandai really wants to push this new set, they'll bring it off the list. I think that the Greymon can be a really cool card. We don't ever get a, two, limited to two, right? It's either banned, limited to one, or unlimited. And I do think that Greymon is a good topic for something that they could test to come out to two. If it does a lot, then keep it back to one, but I don't think that would be the case. I am obviously a Blackwood Greymon stand. It's my favorite deck. Everyone knows that I love Blackwood Greymon. I still play with it to this day and do well every time I play with it. But I do think this card could come to a 2 or off the list, but it is not coming off the list. I don't think they're going to do it. This is me trying to give you guys some educated information. I wish and hope that it does, but it will not. Dover Greymon is not coming off the list. This protection is really, really strong. Can't delete it or reduce its DP, and it's just generic security tap +1 for X anybody in the traits. Now this one you can gain memory, do all kinds of stuff. It didn't come off the list previously. I do think they're trying to slow the game down a little bit with this next set coming out. If you bring in the Doe Greymon, it is just promoting more aggro again with protection that you didn't have to do a whole lot for. This protection is better than the Greymon protection, and it's free to do just for Digivolving. It's so good being able to place a card with X anybody in the traits, which you want to do anyways to gain memory and draw cards. Doe Greymon's not coming off the list. Wergarurumon, the promo card, is also not coming off the list because we've already seen the GAS, the gas deck profiles that people have been playing, abusing on local circuits at the moment. It is just Garurumon, Alter S deck that just hybrid turbos into it and swings out your opponent like crazy, only running the one War Greymon that you can hard play to then Digivolve and do all your crazy shenanigans. Yeah, this card's not coming off the list because that deck's already doing crazy things, and if it did, it would do even more. And I know a lot of the Crossheart fans are going to be mad at me for saying this one, but you're not getting Shoutmon X4 back. I'm sorry to tell you that. This card is just too strong. It was overtuned when it came out, and it's still overtuned. You would just be able to loop through and burn your opponent through with this card. If it said on play, draw 2, trash 1, even so, just being able to draw 2 when you play this card down is just... How many cards say that in Digimon? Leave it in the comments down below. I can't think of a lot of cards that just say draw 2. In Digimon, that is a very insane effect. I know we get to draw every time we Digivolve, but he lets you just draw 2 anytime you play it. You get the material save 2. You get to kill it at the end of the attacks, to unsuspend one of your tamers, to loop it again. It's not coming off, y'all. I'm sorry to say that. I don't have a lot more to say about this guy, but Shoutmon X4 is not coming off. So that is our not coming off the list. I have another topic I want to talk about, and it's the opposite of that. Cards that are coming off the list. These are 2 cards that are currently on the list that I think will be coming off. That being Jet Sylphimon for BT7 and the Grand Kuwagumon promo. Jet Sylphimon, a lot of yellow players have been asking for this forever. The only thing that I am hesitant about is that Jet Sylphimon lets you recover 1 no matter what. If it had a cap like they learned in development, saying all these other cards, if you have 5 or less security, if you have this or much security, recover 1. Jet Sylphimon, I think the reason she's been on the list so long is because she's just generic. When you Digivolve, if it has a hybrid in the trait in its Digivolution cards, you recover 1. Now, this could be very abusable in all the hybrid support we have now, but I think that this would help promote games going a little bit longer and give some decks some life to use this Jet Sylphimon. She doesn't have an inheritable. You're going to have to Digivolve for 3. You do get to recover 1. You can reduce the Digivolution, obviously, but I think that Jet Sylphimon's time to come back is now. We haven't seen a lot of crazy security control shenanigans, but I know when she comes off, you yellow players will find some way to abuse her, but I think that she should come off the list. And Grand Kuwagumon promo, right? This guy, Digiburst, get that extra security attack. There are ways in the game now to hyper go into this dude. We got the training cards. We got all these new mem boosts. We got all this stuff that helps support this deck. And it is an aggro deck, right? It's doing what a lot of the decks do now, but you're having to waste your sources to do it. You're having to do all this stuff. You see it coming a mile away. I think that Grand Kuwagumon promo can come back into the game, and it would be sitting well enough off with all these other aggro decks, and the green players could have something to do also in the same way, instead of having to play these weird kind of aggro, kind of control-y, vortex-y stuff. in things, bring back the bugs, let them go off. I do think that we can do this with the Green Kuwagamon promo. And those are the 2 cards I think that are coming off the list. There is a long list if you guys want to see me go through the whole ban list and restricted card list and tell you card by card what I think about it. Then let me know in the comments below and I'll do that. But going on to the next list, these are the cards that I think will get banned. I know we talked about Omekamon and Royal Knights of the Purge in the getting, probably getting restricted to 1, something like that, along the lines of that. I think that one of these cards have to get banned. I know that is pretty harsh, but it's the only way. They don't care to stop printing cards for Royal Knights. They're not going to do that. So if they're not going to do that, I think a heavy hand has to come down on some of these cards, and they have to pick. Do they want you to be able to draw and see consistency in all your Royal Knights? Then they hit Omekamon. But if they want you to have these crazy plays with the Omekamon, staying alive with the blocker, on deletion, getting all this stuff, one of these 2 cards, I believe, should get banned. Obviously, this is my opinion. I don't think that is very likely. But I want one of these 2 cards to get banned in the game. Now, one I do think that is very, very likely to get banned is Sayo and Co. If you don't already know, I don't like to promote these type of decks when people figure them out. But there are multiple instances and ways to steal your opponent's turn with Sayo and Co. And I know that we have already seen them ban restrict, certain cards with this card. And the more cards they make, it's going to keep making issues with Sayo and Co. to keep making these loops where your opponent doesn't get to play the game. So I think with that instead, they should just ban this card out. They've already printed a new Sayo card, and they can print a new Co card. But this Tamer from EX05 is the main problem in all of the Galaxy decks, and I think that it needs to go. It's crazy. It doesn't need to be in the game. They've seen before that they don't like this stuff, and I think that they finally bring down the hammer and say, okay, we made a mistake. This card is a problem. It brings all these loops in. You can't play the game when it comes out. It doesn't promote what they want you to be able to do. So out of these 3, I know I put all 3 on here, but I do think that Sayo and Co will get banned. That is something I will, stick pretty strongly to that they should do, and I hope that they do. And then the Royal Knights, the Persian Omekamon, I think that is something that would just help with the Royal Knight decks, where they can keep printing all the Royal Knight cards they want, which they're going to keep doing anyways, but then it will just help lower the level of those decks down some. And if I had to pick one, it would be Royal Knights of the Purge. I would love to see this card get banned. Keep the Omekamon plays. You have other ways to get around it. But one more part of the list, what are my hits, right? This is what I'm officially going with to tell you guys that I do think will be hit on the list. And these are the 8 cards I think will be hit. I think that Groundmon X Anybody will get hit to 1. I think that Gravity Crush will get hit to 1. I think that Velgramon will get hit to 1. I think that Miraculous Mega Knight will get hit to 1. That is for the DNA Omnimon deck, to be very specific, because that is the one card that helps that deck out a lot. I know people are upset probably that the Omnimon Alter S is not getting hit, but I do think that this card is what helps give them even another layer of protection in the deck. Now, the Omnimon Alter S is probably the easy hit to go after, but I don't think they'll do that because they need it for the DM decks that they're trying to make. And I think that Royal Knights of the Purge and Omekamon will both get hit to 1. I don't think that both of them together, but one of these 2 cards will get hit to 1. And they're the same 2 cards that I have that one of them might get banned, right? So if they ban one, both of them get hit to 1. If they don't ban, if they don't ban any of them, both of them need to get hit to 1. I do think that the Royal Knight problem in Digimon is pretty high. Y'all know I feel very strongly on it. You're watching my video. These are the cards that I'm trying to give a very unbiased opinion on, but it's hard not to think, outside of how I really feel and how I think that these cards are problems in the game. They will both get hit to 1. Return of the Primogenitor will be hit to 1 in the same light that the Miraculous Mega Knight should get hit to 1. I think that, a lot of people will cry that if you hit the Tamer in the free trait deck, the DNA deck, it'll just make the deck too slow. I could kind of get behind that a little bit, especially, if they don't have the protection like this. I do think the Tamer is the right hit, but I think they hit the Progenitor. Velgramon from the hybrid decks getting hit to 1, and Rika no Naka getting hit to 1. I think that the Tamer is the easiest cause of action for them. That way that if you still want to use your plugins and all this other stuff, you can. I would prefer it be the green plugin, but this is what I'm trying to give you guys a fine line in between of like what I want and what I think they'll do, a meeting in between. I don't want to be too biased on it. but I think that these are 8 hits that will be coming on the list all to one. Very big list, right? But I think there are a lot of problem cards in the game at the moment, and they need a big list to make some room for all these cards that they're trying to bring out. And our hit last time was pretty big too. We had a pretty big list in the last hit. These are all the cards I think will get hit. I do have one more extra category. This is my hit list. If you're on this list, you're getting hit. My hit list. I have one more list, and it's my why list. Like, why is this going on? So we know currently in the game we have a pairing restriction of Mother D Reaper and Shoto Kazuma. Now, Mother D Reaper has a new mother that is way better than her in a newer deck, and it's called Mother Eater. It's very interesting that they don't care that you can pair Shoto with the mother cards, with the Eater Eve, Eater Adam, being able to raid, get piercing on your guy if you need to, or the security type +1 piercing, and just in general, just being able to get the blocker on anything and gain the memory. Shoto gets abused in these decks, so I don't know why they still have the restriction on Mother and Shoto if they're letting Mother Eater also abuse Shoto. So I think that if they want to be consistent, then add another pairing restriction saying that Shoto cannot go in either Mother deck, but that is just me. Alright, I know that was a long video. I appreciate everyone hanging out with me today. Please let me know what you think in the comments down below. I know that ban lists, restricted lists are always very volatile with what people think and very, very opinionated, but leave the comments down below. Be civil about it. This is what I'm trying to help put out there that I think can and should be hit, and just give you guys some of my opinions about the cards. But leave the video a like, subscribe to the channel. I appreciate y'all hanging out with me today. Peace.